But if we then have got the technology to be able to come down to centimetre level accuracy, we can identify each individual plant, and we have the possibility of plant scale husbandry. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that that is what we want at the moment. I'm saying that that technology is available. Can we make use of it? Will it help us to be able to come down to this level? So we're seeing this trend of smaller and smaller management units, but there's no point in having the technology to deal with individual plants if you don't know what to do with each individual plant. Meaning that the machines themselves have got to match your management. It's got to be a system. But if we are going to look at this system, one of the aspects of systems thinking is to be able to understand that there are multiple perspectives of a single system. So if we look at agricultural robots, and we can then say, well, obviously we need to think of it from the point of view of safety. We want to minimize the energy. It's got to be able to make more money than the current system. It's got to be good for the environment. We've got to be able to manage these machines plus the crops. We've got the mechanization issues itself in terms of what these machines should do and what's the most efficient way of doing it. What are the new technologies that are becoming available, and how does society view this system? It starts to get quite complex, but we do deal with complex systems, and if we then move out another layer, we can see that it gets very complex indeed.
We're going to talk about automating the process of weed mapping, with particular reference to blackgrass in cereal crops. I think we're all aware that there is spatial variability within fields. I'd just like to highlight that not only the second point here, not only is there spatial variability within fields, but this is often consistent between seasons, and many important weeds, such as blackgrass, occur in relatively stable patches. And that's a very important point, the stability of the patches. And that will become obvious as we go on. Just want to emphasize that in terms of patches, weeds are opportunists. They will grow where the situation is suitable for them. And so these lions like the shade. Not always like the shade, but anyway, the opportunities. And so the opportunity to exploit this spatial variability is something that we're interested in. The sprayer technology is available, but few farmers spray patches. And one of the reasons for that is, there are several reasons, but the reason which I want to address in this talk is the lack of maps. We don't know exactly where they are with the sufficient precision so that we can reliably and with a reasonable degree of confidence spray those patches. The other thing that we're dealing with is failure of control. We're actually trying to map blackgrass not against soil, but against a complex crop canopy. And that, I would like to just point out to you, is one of the novel aspects of science and what we're doing here, which is we're not trying to distinguish the shape of a weed from soil. We're actually distinguishing the head of blackgrass against a complex plant canopy. So that's one of the things which is, I think, novel in what we're doing. And we're going to, you might say, well, what's the point of mapping these things? The farmers won't spray his field. This is just failure of control. And one of the reasons for that, which is really important to emphasize, is how are you, or I'd like to ask you the question, how are you going to apply pre-emergence herbicides on a spatially variable basis? You need to have prior knowledge of the patch distribution within the field based on observations in the previous season so that you can do patch spraying in the current season. So that's the rationale for some of this. We're actually not just looking at post-emergence patch spraying, we're looking at pre-emergence combined with post-emergence patch spraying.
Basically, the ideas behind targeted application as we started up was, especially in the Netherlands, the reduction of the environmental load. How to minimize spray drift or the spray deposit on soil surface in order to minimize what's going into surface water in the Netherlands. We have spray drift, we have some solutions for spray drift, but in many cases farmers do not want to use all the very high drift reducing techniques like 90%, 95% drift reducing nozzle because of discussion on the coarseness of the sprays, and they want to go back to finer sprays, but then how to apply it at the right place, at the right position, with sufficient efficacy and so on. And of course a discussion about autonomous vehicles on the background also, because there's a labor demand over there. So we want to keep a high efficacy and we want to reduce the risk of residue, because when we start spraying another way, spray deposition starts to change in crop canopy and on the fruits, for example. And what is the effect of changing your spray pattern or the spray volume or the nozzle orientation or the number of nozzles on your deposit on fruits like apples or strawberries, and to an MRL that is discussed, all very vulnerable for all kinds of measures on the flow of the goods afterwards to the marketplace, for example.
One of the other guys we've had working with us here over the last few months is Milan Kulik. And Milan comes from Prague. His work again has followed some of the work of Sohn, in as much as now he's got even more fanciful ways of collecting data from every operation that takes place in the field. And would you believe that spider's web in the middle there is what happens with a wheat crop in the Czech Republic through the whole of the growing cycle. So in 1 year, if you multiplex all of those lines up by the widths of the tyre, something like 85% of the field is covered with a tyre at least once. Something like 35 or 40% is covered with it twice, and so on. And you're down to about 10%, which is covered 3 or 4 times. So there's very little of the field, even in modern agriculture. And we're talking about, if we're talking the Czech Republic, we're talking large fields. We're not talking about relatively small Shropshire fields. We're talking large acre fields. We've done some further work here while he was with us, and he's been finding similar numbers. If we can go to a minimum tillage operation where there aren't quite so many tyre passes, maybe 65. If you can go direct drilling, you might get it down to about 45% of the area of the field covered with a tyre. So if when that tyre goes over, it causes some form of densification, there's a potential large increase for damage to the soil and reduction.